Hello listeners, it's Keith DeJersey here, saying welcome to the summer edition of the Enfield Microphone magazine. It's July 2015. I hope I can find something that will interest you. I'm going to begin with an item sent to me by Robin Bester, so we'll let Robin introduce this first item.
2014 saw the centenary of the beginning of the First World War, with events to mark the passing of 100 years. This article jumps forward 4 years to November 1918, with the armistice, with an eyewitness report by Winifred. Firstly, she gives an account of the terrible results of the great flu epidemic which was sweeping the country, before telling us of the people's reactions to the ceasefire. Later, she describes the first Remembrance Day, 11th of November 1919. She was interviewed by Mike Dickens, who produced this recording.
It was almost 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was in bed. I had the Spanish flu. It was very, very bad about. The week before, I'd watched a house opposite, 4 coffins coming out and being taken away. The mother, the father, and the 2 children. Oh, lots and lots of people, all the way up and down the road. There were funerals all the time. At that time, it seemed as if it was nothing but drawing the blind, because someone had died and was being buried that day. But on the particular day, November the 11th, 1918, I was in bed. I was very poorly, and the mum was expecting the doctor. I'd been in bed for 3 or 4 days, more than that I think. The doctor had been twice, and just as he was coming up the stairs, the maroon sounded. That was that came from the fire station that they used to sound if there was a raid or anything. The maroons, they called it, like guns firing. As the doctor came up the stairs, it was just going, and he turned to my mother and he said, "Oh, the sweetest music I ever heard." So my mother said, "Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it?" And he came in and examined me, and I was very poorly, actually. Of course, everybody immediately began coming home from work, and that my brother Ted came. I can remember him coming in, and he'd got a big firework that he'd bought, and it had got a wood handle, and it was like a long pole, and he'd paid 6pence for it, which was quite an amount for Ted. And he said, I'm going to let it off tonight, you'll be able to see it. And my father, who of course worked nights, he got up, you see. My father got up early, and he went down into the shopping area, and he bought a huge flag, red, white and blue flag. And it was really one to hang out of the window. But he decided, as I was in bed, he wouldn't hang it out in the window, he'd hang it up in the bedroom. So we had this red, white and blue flag hanging almost halfway across the bedroom for me. Of course, they began, people walking up and down the road, singing, and crowds of people all coming up and down playing little bands. And oh, it was such a joyful day. That was the day that the war ended. But I was too poorly really to appreciate it all. And I remember when it was dusk in the evening, Ted went up the garden with this firework, and Mum tried to help me up in bed so that I could see through all but my back, and that did ache. I was really poorly. And I looked out, and he'd lit it, and it came bright red. And then he waved it like this, going bright red, and then it changed to white, and then it was blue. And it kept changing from red, white and blue. It was a beautiful firework, really, and it was one to hold in your hand, you see. And I remember him rushing upstairs. "Did you see it, Win? Did you see it? Did you like it?" I said, "Oh, it was wonderful. It really was wonderful, but I was really too ill to appreciate it."
Were there any other celebrations later on?
Yes, the children had a party, the school children, but not until the next July. It was July, the Peace Days were, and we had a party in the park. I can remember we all made paper hats. The little ones had red, and then the middle school had white, and we had to make blue hats, you see, out of crinkly paper. And we had to march from the school to the park, all with these red, white and blue hats on, the little ones and the middle school and that. And everybody said it was magnificent. Everybody thought it was a wonderful sight to see all the school coming down the road with just red, white and blue. I think we did the races first, and I won a prize in the skipping rope race. And I had a blue necklace, and I was so thrilled and pleased with it. I kept it in the box, and I very seldom wore it. And I used to get it out and look at it. It was too beautiful to wear. This beautiful blue, necklace that I won. Oh, dear. But the tea party, everybody had a bag. And in the bag there was a currant bun and a sandwich and a plain cake. There was a plain cake. It was a wonderful day, really, having this. And prior to us going to the park, they gave us all a medal that had got, it was a medal with red, white and blue ribbon, and it was commemorating the war. I've still got mine. And we all had to wear them on that day. And when the first armistice service was, the memorial service, was on the 11th of November 1919. And, of course, they were all at work then. Ted was at work and Nellie was at work and Percy. And my mother said to me at breakfast, we'd got a holiday from school. And she said, come on, get up, hurry up with your breakfast because I'm going to take you into town. So I said, this morning? And she said, yes, we're going into town because this is a very, very special day. And I'm sure it's one that you will remember all the days of your life. She said, down to the memorial service for the soldiers that were killed. And we went into town, we walked up Hill Street to Victoria Square. We were there at 10:30, quite early. We were right opposite the council house, and they erected this platform in the middle of Victoria Square for people like the Bishop of Birmingham and the Lord Mayor and all the councillors and everything. And there were soldiers there, and as we stood there, the people gradually gathered and gathered and gathered and gathered until all the way down Coleman Row and all the way back to Broad Street, down Hill Street, all round the council house and Chamberlain Square, the town hall. Everywhere was just massed with people. Men and women and children were all there. And of course, they closed all the factories and they stopped every bit of traffic, and all the machinery in every works was stopped as well, so that it was absolutely dead silence. They began to play the Last Post. There was a swish as every man's hat came on. I noticed it particularly. All the way I looked, there was this sort of the movement of the arm up and the hat off. And it was quite well, you can imagine it to be quite a swish, because everybody wore hats in those days. Little boys and caps, and older men with their trilbies and bowlers and all kinds of things that they wore. And then we had the service. It was very similar, the service, to the same that they have today. It was more or less the same, really. But I can remember standing there on that curb and them singing Abide With Me. And I was thinking of Curly. He was the one I was thinking about. And the tears rolled down my cheek. I was only 12, but I can remember it now. How I felt as if I'd got plums in my mouth. And this tear came down my... Thinking of Curly, really. the soldier that we'd made friends with, the American. But, of course, afterwards everybody dispersed and we went home. But I shall always remember that service. It was the very first Remembrance Day. I had 2 minutes silence at the actual time that the war ended.
Well, thank you, Robin. That was an interesting article. I would imagine it was done sometime during the 1990s, as she was only 12 at the end of the war. Anyway, we'll hear some more of your articles later on. Thank you very much. Earlier this year, the Enfield Vision Group visited the Royal British Legion Poppy Factory in Richmond. It was an interesting visit. We had a guided tour, and we were shown how poppies were assembled. They're all done by hand, and we all had a go at assembling a poppy ourselves. Let's now go over to the factory and start the guided tour.
Okay, so this is the side of the factory where we assemble the poppies, the wreaths, and the crosses and other artefacts. Now, I normally just let everybody just go off under their own steam on this side of the factory. We encourage you to talk to the staff, the drivers I just mentioned. So down here, Harry the guide dog is not here, but you can see where she lives in the corner here. So down this right-hand side near the window, they mainly make the wreaths, including here. The top right, they make poppies, although I think nowadays most of those are getting made at home by the home workers. The far right corner, this is a gentleman I forgot to mention. I think he's got one of the best job titles ever. He's called a Royal Wreath Maker. And people find that interesting. I tend to wander up there and I will explain things. And then you can make a poppy. Where's Jeanette? So Jeanette will meet some of you at the top and she'll make poppies. Once I think you've all seen enough and you're beginning to look a bit bored, I will gather you together and take you to the other side of the factory where is the warehouse and where we have machines that cut out the petals. Now what I'm going to do today, I'm going to ask the Winchester group to do what I've just said and wander around here on the floor. Jeanette will be here, no, she's gone, to answer questions. Or you can still grab me there, okay? But I'm going to walk around with the Enfield group.
After that little introduction, we were shown how they used poppies to make standard wreaths.
So at this end, we've got people making those standard wreaths I told you about, some of you held. I'll get one in a minute. These are made out of 58 poppies that are made elsewhere, I believe, and they are literally just stuck onto a plastic base. And there are 58 poppies on each one, and someone who is very adept with their hands makes about 80 a day. These are called our standard wreaths.
Are these all made by hand?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The poppies are made by hand. Now I've seen them, they are. And then they're stuck onto...
It's all assembled by hand, is it?
Yes, that's what I have. We have about 5 people at this end, and that's what they are doing. They are sticking the poppies onto the plastic base. The actual poppies are made further up the factory.
And these wreaths are laid on Remembrance Days?
Yes, and anywhere. I mean, if you imagine every little memorial in every little village or every little town, they're all laid on.
As our guide told us, all the wreaths are made from poppies, but there's one that's made from real flowers.
The only one made out of real flowers is the Commonwealth wreath, and it's laid by the Foreign Secretary, and we don't make that, it's made at Kew Gardens. And they use flowers from each of the 28 countries that we still have some form of governance over. What we have here are the cardboard boxes, because every single wreath gets its own individual box. Okay, so these are the crosses. I don't know whether anybody wants to hold one. They're just made out of plywood almost. They're very, very light. And all we actually do...
Little plywood cross.
Yeah, I think you got one.
I've got, yeah, look.
In the middle. Yeah. And all we do actually... Oh, thank you. And all we do is stick a poppy in the middle. So if you want to just look at that one now, we've now stuck a poppy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The poppy in the middle.
In the middle.
I see, that's neat, yeah.
It's neat.
Next, we went to look at the machinery used in the manufacturing of poppies.
Now, when we go next door, I'll show you the machines that cut out the shape of the poppies. Now, the little paper poppies come out of the cutting machine as they are needed. The ones for the poppy too, you might like to feel these. These are, as they are cut out, next door, they're made out of polyester.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Little poppy shape.
So what happens is, they come in here, Dave here makes a little pile of these petals, and he puts them in the heat press. Put your hand out, turn it up,
Oh, that's warm.
So what happens is that this polyester, it goes under the heat press, it melts the polyester and crimps it into a different shape. We'll give you all a chance to feel that.
I always wondered how they crimp.
So they're still warm.
I see, yeah.
That's clever, isn't it?
They're still warm.
Well, next we were shown how a poppy is assembled. Now, I did make a recording of this, but it was a little bit too noisy because everyone was being shown at once and they were all chatting a lot. There were 3 or 4 people trying to show us. So I'll do my best to explain the process to myself. The basic tool used is a circular wooden block, I suppose about 3 inches in diameter, with a slot running right across the diameter and a small hole in the middle of that slot, if you can picture that. Now, you've all seen a poppy. It consists of a stalk, a leaf, and a petal, and a little press stud to finally secure it all together. So you lay your stalk down on this wooden block, with the head of the stalk in the hole in the middle. The heads had a little pin sticking out. The leaf and the petal have a small hole. So you put the leaf on first with the pin through the hole, same with the petal. Then finally you secure it all with a little press stud which clicks onto the top of the pin. That secures your poppy. Then you lift it all out and there you are, you've made a poppy. It was all very interesting. Finally, we visited the Royal Wreath Maker.
So I told you about the Royal Wreath Maker, and this is where the Royal Wreath Maker works. And as you can tell from his title, he makes all the royal wreaths and all the other special wreaths for, the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition and all these things. Now, as I said in the showroom, he makes everything from scratch. He makes the shape of the wreath. Most wreaths start off with laurel leaves round the edge, and then whatever is needed to go on top, poppies, ribbon, whatever. The interesting thing is that the poppies on the Queen's wreath and other wreaths are not the same as the poppies you wear on your coat. They've got broom bristle in the middle. They have the petals wrapped round, and they're all held together with twine and then covered up with green paper. Now, what is interesting about the broom bristle is that several years ago our suppliers put up their prices so much that we could no longer afford it. So we started buying broom heads. And I don't know whether any of you could want to. I've actually got a cold broom head here, and what we do,
Use the bristle.
he cuts off the bristle into little clumps.
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea.
Oh, yes.
Roommates we don't want, we'll make sure they're clean and then we have something.
What do you do with the wood afterwards?
Anybody else feel the broom bristle? All right. Now, the other thing is, though, is that these poppies usually have to have green ends. I don't know what the bristle is pretending to be, stamens perhaps, but it's meant to have green ends. So to do that, he gets his bristle and he dips it into a jar of glue, and then he dips it into a jar of green dyed sawdust. So if you ever thought that this was sophisticated, it's not. It's like Blue Peter, basically. But he does it all here.
I wonder what the Queen thought about that.
Creatures, they look so good, don't they? You'd never think that they...
No.
You know, I sometimes seriously think they're going to have this. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this. This is probably the biggest thing that we have. It's a huge wreath made out of cardboard poppies that have all been stapled together. And the reason for this is that in 2011, it was the 95th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme in 1916. And the British Legion wrote to all of its members and sent them one of these cardboard poppies and invited them to write a message on the back in memory of someone who'd not necessarily died at the Battle of the Somme, but someone who had fought there. And they got 20,000 back. And I think that eventually they weren't quite sure what to do with them all, so they sent them to us. And someone like Spark had the idea of stapling them all together in the shape of a wreath. So there are 10,000 on each side. They all have a message on. This here in the middle is a sample. Someone has found some old photos, digitised them, stuck it on, and it's terribly faded, and my eyesight is terrible, but it says, a gentle grandad who had seen hell on earth. And there's a couple of little pictures there. That's not terrible. Sorry? That's not terrible. You could read it. Well, I am very close today. So what we're going to do now, this is a factory, not a museum. I always say this, and we do get the odd bottleneck, and we're just about to have one of them. So there is a corridor here at the end. To the right, there is a wreath this size, a very large wreath. I think it's the army one. If we turn left, there are two more, one for the Navy and one for the Air Force. Now, when I said that all wreaths are boned, I was fibbing slightly. Those three big ones are reused. So every year we take them up to the Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey, and then afterwards we bring them back here for safekeeping. Also just round the corner here is the large rectangular wreath I told you about that goes round the tomb of the unknown warrior. There's also on the wall in front of you, you can see there are lots of photos of the royal visits and the royal family and their visits to the poppy factory. So if I can ask you can have a quick look to the right, but then move up to the left, and I will meet you at the top.
Well, that concludes our visit to the Royal British Legion Poppy Factory at Richmond. I hope you found it interesting. Next, how would anyone who is registered blind fancy a bit of target practice using an air rifle? Well, you couldn't see the target, of course, true, but now I've discovered recently, though I think it's been around for a few years, there's something called audio shooting for blind people. This is done using headphones and a light detector, and the gun is specially adapted. So as you point the gun, you hear the high-pitched sound through the headphones when you're on target. Some of us, about 5 of us, from Enfield Vision, visit the East Barnet Shooting Club on the 2nd and 4th Monday in every month. I've started going there now. So I made a little recording of how it was done. You'll hear me with my rifle and my instructor beside me. Now, it's an air rifle, not a firearm. I couldn't get all the recording I wanted because the manager wasn't there. I wanted to talk about the history of the club a little bit. However, we'll go on to how the shooting is done. I'm looking for my target now. Here we are. Yeah, there it is. There. The pitch altered, as you hear. When do I shoot? Done it, not a bad shot. So that's how it's actually done. You have a pair of headphones. I managed to make a recording from the headphones I was using. And as you move, the rifle sits on a stand, and you move the rifle around. And when you hear that pitch alter, the higher it goes, so when you get right on your target, it's the highest pitch. That's when you have to pull the trigger. The movement's very sensitive, though. But that's how it's all done. So if any of you are interested in this sort of thing, it's not too difficult. It's quite challenging, but I enjoy doing it. I enjoy it much more than archery, because in the end you have an instructor, but in the end you're left to finally do it yourself as you as you go on. So I'm sorry that the recording is a little bit short, but I didn't get all I wanted. So next time, hopefully, I'll do a little article on the history of the club and how long it's been going, and just how they adapt the guns. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Next, here's an article by Peter Jones. I believe Peter works for South Glamorgan Talking Magazines. It's an article about crocodiles.
The Cotswolds are a favourite place of Linda and I to visit, and having been there so many times, it was wonderful to discover a new and exciting place to visit. But we did take heed of one piece of good advice before we went.
Never smile at a crocodile. No, you can't get friendly with a crocodile. Don't be taken in by his welcome grin. He's imagining how well you'd fit within his skin.
Yes, Crocodile World had opened in Bryce Norton, more famous for its RAF base. It's the first and only crocodile zoo in the United Kingdom, and it has the largest collection of crocodilians with 12 different species on show. Sean Foggett is considered the UK's crocodile expert and set up the enterprise to conserve the species and at the same time to educate the public. Before I met up with Sean, we had a chance to see Jamie, the keeper, feeding them.
Never smile at a crocodile. Say good night, now good day. Clear the aisle and never smile at Mr. Crocodile.
Are they big eaters?
You get the idea that crocodiles are eating machines from what we see on documentaries. Of course, they eat zebras, wildebeests, all sorts of these large gamey animals. But in reality, those big meals may only come round once or twice a year there. And these documentaries are very good at showing us the exciting part where they catch and eat their food. They're not so good at showing us the following 6 months where the crocodile's really only eating 1 or 2 small fish a week there. So their body requirements are just completely different to ours. At this age here, with our juvenile Nile crocodiles, they'd be feeding on lots of things like fish, frogs, maybe the occasional insect and the small mammals there as well. But in reality, most crocodiles' diet is made up of fish. That builds up a huge part of the natural diet.
Nothing vegetarian?
Oh, no. So we say for crocs to get their veg, really, they need to eat a vegetarian, I suppose. That's the way they would do it, really.
I eventually met up with Sean Foggett himself in the small on-site cafe and wanted to know how it all came about.
Lifelong dream of a child, really. Growing up, always wanted to work with crocodiles and learn about them. They just fascinated me. After keeping them, I've been keeping them 14 years now. And I decided back in 2008 I was going to sell my house and put all the proceeds into opening the UK's first crocodile conservation and education centre.
Nice.
That took place in a little tiny village called Crawley, not Crawley in West Sussex, but Crawley in Oxfordshire. It was a very small site, which was located on the edge of a trading estate. It was the only place that I could get it going, and we had no external funding whatsoever. So it did start very small and has grown very, very quickly. That was only 3 years ago we started that.
And you've moved, I know, just recently?
Yeah, we moved in February of this year, 2014, and we've moved to a site which is now 4 times the size, and we have planning consent to open 7 days a week, which we didn't at our previous location. Nowhere else in the country do you have the chance to get so close in a safe way to such a formidable predator.
I've seen crocodiles in zoos around the country, but often they don't move.
No,
they
exactly.
look total lack of interest, and you move on. But here, the first thing I noticed, they all seem to be thriving and active.
Yeah, they're very, very active. It's one thing that we pride ourselves on is the health and the quality of lifestyle that we give these animals in captivity.
And how did Jamie get involved in this strange work?
I started off as a volunteer, so I wanted to come in, work with snakes, lizards, all sorts of things, and then soon caught the crocodile bug, as it were, and it's just been an obsession ever since.
Crocodilians cover crocodiles, alligators, and...
Oh, and gharials. So it covers, so the crocodile family, the alligator family, which includes caimans as well, and then this third one, the gharial. And a gharial is the crocodilian with a very, very long, thin snout. They're a fish-eating croc from India, and they're thought to be the most aquatic, and as they feed on lots of small fish, this very long, thin snout makes them that little bit quicker in the water there for catching their food, so they'd be much faster than something with a broader snout like our Nile crocodiles here.
From first glance, the crocodiles seem to have a longer, thinner snout, and alligators shorter, stubbier. Is that a fair description?
Generally it is, yes. The best way, though, to tell apart these two families is actually their teeth, because there's 2 members of the alligator family with the same shaped head as a crocodile, and what we look at is the teeth on the bottom jaw, and the 4th tooth along on each side at the bottom in particular, with a crocodile, grows outside of the top jaw, so you can see them sticking out when their mouth's closed, whereas all alligators actually have an overbite, so their bottom row of teeth are hidden by that top row there, so they have a much neater mouth, say, in appearance.
Well, I obviously got a sense of hearing because you've just been calling them.
Oh, yes, so they do have ears. Their ears are situated just behind their eye. There's a tiny little slit there just behind the eye. That's the opening for their ear, which they can close as well when they go underwater. So, like us, if we go swimming, get water in our ears, it would affect our hearing, but for a young crocodile with lots of predators, that could be very dangerous, so they just close off their ears when they go underwater, so when they resurface, they can hear perfectly.
A keen sense of hearing, though.
Oh, yeah, very, very good sense of hearing, great sense of smell, and great eyesight, too.
Talking of their eyes, eyelids, do they close their eyes?
Oh, they will close their eyes. Crocodiles, so we find here, when there's people around watching, they tend to have their eyes open. I think that's really to make sure they've got an eye on us, to make sure we're not a predator, towards them at all. But so they'd have the top and bottom eyelid just like we do, but they have a third one as well, which has a very boring name, the nictitating membrane, but really it's a built-in pair of swimming goggles. So when they go under, this extra layer of skin will cover their eyes to protect them there.
We're looking at one across on the other unit over there.
Oh, Albert, yes.
He's huge.
Oh, he is. He's just over 10 feet in length. But believe it or not, some crocodilians can reach almost 20 feet in length there. So at the moment, he's considered medium-sized, although you wouldn't believe it when you see him.
No. And his partner, who has just laid eggs, I understand.
Yes, she has.
Very small in comparison.
Oh, she is. So there is a very big size difference between the males and females there. His partner, Daisy's had a bit of a checkered past. We're not too sure exactly how old she is, so she's had a few different homes there. So we're not that sure if she's a lot younger than Albert, but I'd say they're of similar age.
And very protective of their young, because they lay eggs in a nest.
They do, yes. So very much like a bird would there. So Mum would what we find here at the zoo is Mum builds her nest out of all the bark chippings on the land area. They can spend a good few days building it up with their back feet. When they're ready to lay, they dig a small hole in it, make sure the temperature's perfect for their little crocodiles, and then she'll lay the eggs there, and then she'll just sit and guard them until the day they hatch.
Yeah. So once they've hatched, then she's a good mother.
Oh, she is, yes. So you wouldn't expect an animal like a crocodile to be a good mother, really. Although she'd never feed her babies, she's really more of a bodyguard there. So they only have a 1% survival rate. The youngsters there. So Mum's doing the best that she can to scare away any of these bigger predators.
That's
from
in the wild, of course.
Yes, and I'm sure that the mums would be doing the same here as well. If they thought their babies were in any danger, she'd be straight over there to help them out.
But when does she leave them? Because you said she doesn't help feed them. They've got to look after themselves.
Oh, they do. So they have to feed themselves. So Mum acts as that bodyguard, and she may do that for the first year or so, maybe until the next breeding season there.
Finally, I asked Sean if crocodiles are an endangered species.
There's 23 different types of crocodilian, and there's 6 of those are critically endangered. So every single one of those species has been protected since the late 70s. And in the late 70s, when they first became classified on the endangered list, every single one was endangered or worse. But they are making a recovery. However, like I said, there's 6 species that are still critically endangered. And some of these animals, there's less than 120 of them left in the wild.
The main purpose is to breed them in captivity and eventually get them back into the wild.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's part of the goal for some species. How tricky that becomes because of the politics involved, we'll find out. But I'm a very determined person. I've started this from nothing. So, we'll see how we go. But it's definitely something that's close to my heart that I want to do. What better thing could we do for a species that we're trying to help in the wild?
Smile at Mr. Croc. Dial.
Well, I was going through my archives and I found some recordings I'd made when I first visited the Cheshire home in Guernsey in 1999. I spoke to one of the residents and staff. First, here's a little interview I did with a resident gardener called Dave. Are we in the garden area now at all?
Yes, we are. You're sitting on one of the garden benches.
So what's in your garden? What type of, is it flowers and vegetables, etc.?
It's all flowers.
It's all flowers?
Yeah.
All flowers.
Like right behind you,
yeah.
Are some roses.
Yeah. And then?
There's the Japanese anemone.
Is that number any other common English name? That one? Is it?
No. Not as far as I know.
No.
There's the honeysuckle.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of plants about.
Yeah, I see. And are you one of the chief gardeners here?
I won't say I'm the chief gardener. No. I like gardening as a hobby.
No,
and I send away to companies in England
Yeah.
Because the selection of plants that you can get over here isn't that great. So if there's any new plants that come out, I have to send to England for them.
Yeah, I see.
So I do that nearly every year.
I'm surprised. A place like Guernsey, it hasn't got a great selection of plants, despite its...
It's got a good selection, but it seems like if there's a new plant that comes out, say this year, it usually takes a couple of years before it arrives in Guernsey for some reason.
I see, yeah.
And like for instance, this year there was a new fuchsia that came out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to wait 2 or 3 years before I can get it. So I tend to wait for it this year.
It can be that long before it gets to Guernsey?
Oh, sometimes, yeah. And the funny thing is, they're actually grown in Guernsey. It's the companies over here grow them for the people in England.
Yeah. Do we have any, I don't know much about flowers or plants, do we have any flowers specifically attributed to Guernsey? Is there a local Guernsey flower, in other words?
Well, I don't know about wild ones, but about the nearest I suppose you would get to like a Guernsey flower, but apparently that originated in South Africa, is the Guernsey lily.
Oh, I see, the Guernsey lily, yeah. I'd heard of it, yeah.
But
flowers are flowers everywhere, I suppose,
yeah,
mostly.
I've got a feeling that came from South Africa originally.
Yeah.
Next I spoke to Marlene, who was the head of the home at the time, and we spoke about the history of the Cheshire homes.
So I've got with me, is it Marlene, is it?
Marlene.
The matron of the home?
No, I'm not called a matron.
Oh, you're not.
I'm called the head of home.
Head of home, I see.
That's a traditional title with the Leonard Cheshire Foundation.
I see. Tell me something about Leonard Cheshire. He founded these homes, didn't he?
He did. The first one was opened in 1948. At that time, Leonard Cheshire had been looking around following the war. He'd been looking for something that provided the same compassion and companionship that there was during the Second World War. Out of the blue, he was approached by a matron at a hospital because one of the gentlemen that he knew during the war was terminally ill. And needed to be moved out to accommodation outside of the hospital. And in those days, there was nothing set up for these people. And Leonard Cheshire looked around to find Arthur Sykes's family, and he could find no trace of any family who would be able to take care of him. So the matron went back to Leonard Cheshire and said, "You must find something." And Leonard Cheshire looked around and decided to take Arthur Sykes into his house. And that was the start of the Cheshire Homes.
That was back in 1948?
Yes.
How many of these homes are there roughly, do you know, around the UK?
In the UK themselves, there are approximately 70.
Yeah.
But it is actually an international organisation. Oh. It's divided into the UK division and the international. We actually in Guernsey are part of the international, and there are something like 200 homes around the world, from places as far as apart as North America and Peking, Beijing, and Japan.
And contrary to what people think, they're not just the old people's homes, are they? As people often believe they are. They're more than that, isn't it?
Yes, they are. Yeah. Each home fulfills the need within the community, and usually they are set up by the community themselves. In our case, a feasibility was done back in 1985. Back in 1981, which was the International Year of the Disabled. Yeah. And it was found that the need in Guernsey was for a home for the younger physically disabled. It was very, very difficult to actually find out how many people would be in need of the service that we provide, because in Guernsey there isn't a disability register.
Oh, not even now?
No, there isn't. or at least it is not compulsory to be registered on the disability register. Therefore, people have the choice
of remaining not registered disabled.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, I see. But there is a register if they want it.
Yes.
So
yes.
The Cheshire Home is for helping physically disabled people have enhance their lives. Is that right?
That's right. Guernsey found that was an area that was needed to be developed. So a house was bought in 1985, and we opened in 1987. And the philosophy, certainly of the Guernsey Cheshire Home, is very much of enabling our residents to maintain their independence, for them to really live a life of their choosing. The care that we provide, Keith, is very much resident-led.
Resident-led,
yes. So the residents tell us what it is that they want, what assistance they need.
I see. Yeah, fine. That's the policy of all the Cheshire Homes, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Cheshire Homes.
Yes.
Also, didn't he have a wife who founded, what was the other one, her name?
Yes,
Ryder.
Sue Ryder.
And Ryder.
Yes. So the Ryder Homes, yes, in the UK we haven't got one in Guernsey.
No, but there are Ryder Homes in the UK.
Yes, there are.
Are they on the same philosophy as Cheshire Homes?
I don't know very much about them, Keith, and
of
I wouldn't be able to give you much information on that.
This originally was a house you bought. The home was once a private house, was it?
It was a hotel.
A hotel, I see.
It was Shorncliffe Hotel.
Shorncliffe Hotel, yeah. So how many how many residents, is it 9 someone, we have 9 residents?
Right. We have 11 rooms.
11 rooms, yeah.
We have 9 long stay residents.
Yeah.
The 2 rooms we use for respite care.
Yeah, I see.
And we also take people for daycare.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was Marlene, who was head of the home at the time in 1999. The visit was very interesting. I spoke to 1 or 2 other people, and one of the nurses explained to me the home is run largely by the residents. They have a residents committee, and they can decide, for example, whether somebody's suitable or not for the home. So when somebody applies to come into the home, they stay there for a 3-month trial. Then the committee can finally decide if he or she is suitable. They don't turn in many people away. In fact, I don't think they've turned anybody away so far. They told me that they would only turn somebody away if they were found to be disruptive. It was a very interesting visit. Finally, I will hand you over to Robin, who will introduce the last item on this magazine.
Here is an article that was prepared for the South Glamorgan Talking magazine. It is about a remarkable man. I found the item really interesting, and I'm sure you will too. So, over to the announcer in the Cardiff studio.
Now, just going to the studio is John Mead, one of our new presenters, and he's going to talk about his friend who's very much involved in the world of sailing.
Yes, Alan, that's right. His name is Roger Hall. Now, I've known Roger for some 45 years via our joint interest in sailing. Roger's eyesight began failing in his early days, and he was registered as blind when he was 17. He was offered training in a number of activities, but in the end he decided that what he really wanted to do would have to involve sailing. Now, Roger is 67 years old, and he says that he's just retired. I don't believe that at all. We recorded our conversation at his home in Penarth, sitting with his lovely wife Sian, and looking out at a view overlooking Cardiff Bay, the docks, and a good chunk of the Bristol Channel, good place for sailing. And on the patio below us stands the steam launch, which not only Roger built, but he also goes to sea in. He also has a sailing boat, Lundy Gull, which he and his friend Ray built, and which they sail together. His dream of working on boats of all aspects, of all sizes and shapes, he made come true. That's what he has done. How did he manage it? Well, let him explain.
I think that I've been very, very lucky with my life. I think that I'm fortunate in the way that I've adapted to my problems. And, anybody listening might think that this guy is a little bit over the top. All I can say about it is that if anybody out there listening can get any sort of drive from the things I've done, then it's all worthwhile, because I just generally feel that you've got to keep pushing or nothing happens. And it is so easy to sit back and do nothing and think, poor me. But you've just got to go out there and do it.
That's just what he did. The very first World Blind Sailing Championships were held in Auckland, New Zealand in 1992. Roger not only participated in that event, but for many years, I should tell you, he himself has taught blind people how to sail and race.
That's correct, yeah, that was the first one. That was a great thing to do, in as much as it really was the foothold in blind sailing, I think. I mean, I've taught blind sailing for about 30 years, but internationally it was comparatively unknown. And the fact that, there were 14 countries had put teams forward to race in New Zealand was a great thing on the international scene. And it was quite a privilege. We did very well again. I think we were fourth there. It was held at the Royal Auckland Yacht Club. All of the boats there were designed by a gentleman called Bruce Farr. There were a fleet of his boats there belonging to various big companies like Hewlett-Packard and Timberland and Kodak, Sony, and they used to use them for match racing. So we all used to draw lots for these particular boats, and we raced there for a fortnight, and that was a great experience.
How exactly do you teach blind sailing for those of us who haven't been blind, fortunately enough?
You would start by getting the person entirely familiar with the boat. Also, it's very useful if somebody has models. In the early days, one of the volunteers had made a model of a boat and its rig, so that would be a tactile experience for somebody that had never had anything to do with boats before, could feel exactly what was what, even to the degree of this gentleman built a marina, a model marina, to show what happened when the tides went up and down and the marina slid up and down the poles, to adjust for the tides and the angle of the walkway down, and basically give somebody who has no experience of sailing whatsoever a picture in their own mind's eye of what it is they're dealing with. Now, as far as the individual boats are concerned, the first thing you do is spend a day on board, letting them familiarise themselves with all the deck layout, cabin layout, the cockpit layout, basic winch training, and then you would go for it. I mean, the first thing that they would have to experience is the feel of the wind on their face, the principles of going direct into the wind by tacking, as it's known. You would sail zigzag into the wind at anything between 40 degrees or 35 degrees if you're pushing it, getting as close to the wind as you can to go advanced into the wind as quickly as possible. And the further off you are of the wind, the easier you would have the sails further out, and so the speed would improve. But as I say, it's very much a seat-of-the-pants feeling. There was also a thing called an audio compass, which, as you become further off the wind angle, if you like, the angle of the wind to yourself is becoming greater, then the feeling of the wind on your face is becoming less. And obviously, as you're sailing downwind, the wind being behind you, you won't feel any change in wind direction at all unless you're quite experienced. So an audio compass was invented, which gave you a two-tone bleep, which you could set the boat on course and set the compass to the heading of the boat. And if you went either side of that course, the bleeps would differ accordingly and get faster, so that you were able to keep the boat pointing in that line.
Now, it was in 1995 that Roger, together with his friend Derek Fawcett, the man who invented the audio compass, they decided to enter that year's two-handed race to the Azores and back. Now, Derek has normal eyesight. Roger, as you know, cannot see at all. how did they cope? It was 1,200 miles there and 1,200 miles back to Falmouth, where they started. The yacht the two of them were using was huge. It was over 50 feet long, and it had an appropriate complement of sails, rigging and winches. Now this is continuous sailing, 24 hours a day, throughout the race. There are no stops. So the two of them use the usual system of watches, that's what we call it, which means that one person is on deck, or navigating, or sailing, and the other person possibly asleep down below, or maybe cooking, or something like that. So just how did they manage those watches? Remember, only two of them, one with good visual sight, Roger without that facility.
As far as the watches are concerned, if I could just explain a watch, a 4-hour watch, which gives you time to catch up on a bit of sleep, to prepare food, or general running of the boat. Somebody who's on watch would be basically on deck, sail trimming, navigation, and just tactics. You know, I mean, obviously you discuss your tactics with your colleague. We were very fortunate on board. We had a full set of instruments on board, which gave us, they were all voice synthesized, so that I knew instantly what sort of speed the boat was doing. As I mentioned earlier, sailing the boat is seat of the pants stuff anyway. Once you've learned to sail, then you've got it. It's not something that you ever forget. It's like riding a bike. There's a lot of finer points with it, obviously sail trimming and things like that. But from a safety aspect, we had radar on board, so if ever I was on watch, we would have the radar switched on, which would give a safety screen around the boat of 2 miles. And if any other vessel or any obstruction came within that 2-mile circumference of the boat, an alarm would sound, and I would just call the skipper and say, we've got a fish. As far as the actual sailing of the boat is concerned, one of the problems, of course, is the fact the boat was quite large. You sailed on your own. When it came down to sail changes and that sort of thing, things were quite heavy. And interestingly, we weren't allowed to use any electric winches or anything like that. Everything had to be done manually. That was just the rules of the race. So it was a fairly physical experience. We had a tremendous run out to the Azores. We were there in about 6.5 days, which is, it's a distance of 1,250 miles to Ponta Delgada from Falmouth, and which was quite a record sail for a monohull, really. We were averaging between 10 and 14 knots a lot of the time. And the return journey was the total opposite. We had light winds to start, and then we had very, very heavy winds, all in the wrong direction. So we had quite a bashing. And then we had best part of a week with absolutely no wind at all. And we eventually ran out of time and decided to throw in the towel and motor back, as Derek had to be back. The funny story about that, actually, was 3,000 or 4,000 ton on board. So I got him on the radio. Eventually, when he got nearer, we picked up his name, and he said, yes, certainly. He said, drop your sails. I got him on the radio. Eventually, when he got nearer, we picked up his name, and he said, yes, certainly. He said, drop your sails, I'll come alongside you now. Well, the thoughts of a tanker coming alongside you is a bit horrendous to start with. You think that the fact that there's no wind, that the sea is calm, but it's in fact, it's not. When a boat is sitting there wallowing, the boom is slashing back and forward, and it's generally quite sloppy. And as this tanker came alongside us with all these appendages sticking out the side of it, and in all fairness, the skipper, he sold us 25 gallons of diesel. And he just happened to have cans on board. And he charged us good and proper for them, and I was most impressed. He gave all the money to his Filipino crew, which I thought was fair enough, but he got us out of trouble, and we got back into Falmouth within 24 hours. So that was quite a silly situation. When it all happened, we thought, I don't really believe this. Did this really happen? But it was a wonderful experience, it really was.
But not perhaps one that most people would undertake without sight. Roger's life story is amazing.
Well, thank you, Robin, for that contribution. I'm afraid that brings us to the end of the Enfield Microphone magazine for the summer of 2015. I'm sorry if it's a little bit on the short side this time, but I have no more suitable material left at the moment. So if any of you want to make a contribution, I can receive recordings on minidisc, CD, cassette, and USB memory stick. By the way, I forgot to mention this is my 5th edition. So if you want to contact me, you can call me on the telephone at home, 0208 805 6578. My mobile, 07887 507471. Email, keithdjersey@btinternet.com. My name is all one word, KEITHDEJERSEY @btinternet.com. I look forward very much to hearing from you. Anyway, I hope to be back with you in October for the next edition. In the meantime, it's Keith the Jersey saying bye for now.